My brother's new wife made a pass at me during their wedding reception. I stupidly gave in and now she's pregnant. DNA test confirms it's mine. I am 32, never thought I'd be in this situation. My brother Jake, am 35, has always been the golden child of our family, successful career, charming personality, and now married to a beautiful woman. I've always felt like I lived in his shadow, but I never resented him for it. We've always been close, and I was genuinely happy when he found Sarah, F29. Jake and Sarah's relationship moved quickly. They met at a charity gala about a year and a half ago, and within 6 months, they were engaged. Our family was thrilled, especially our parents who had been not so subtly hinting that Jake should settle down. I had only met Sarah a handful of times before the wedding, but she seemed nice enough. Gorgeous, of course, Jake always did have a type, but also intelligent and witty. The wedding was a lavish affair. Jake spared no expense, renting out a beautiful vineyard for the ceremony and reception. I was the best man, and everything went smoothly during the ceremony. It wasn't until the reception that things went off the rails. I had a few drinks at the open bar, probably more than I should have. I was feeling a bit melancholy, watching my brother start this new chapter of his life while I was still single and struggling to find my place in the world. I stepped outside to get some fresh air and clear my head. That's when Sarah approached me. She looked stunning in her wedding dress, her hair slightly disheveled from dancing. She said she needed a break from all the attention and asked if I wanted to take a walk through the vineyard. I agreed, thinking nothing of it at the time. As we walked, Sarah started talking about how nervous she was about married life. She confided that she wasn't sure if she was ready for such a big commitment. I tried to reassure her, telling her that Jake was a great guy and that they seemed perfect for each other. That's when she dropped the bombshell. "I'm not sure if I married the right brother," she said, her eyes locked on mine. I was stunned. Before I could react, she leaned in and kissed me. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a spark, but I immediately pushed her away. "Sarah, what are you doing?" I asked, my heart racing. She looked at me with tears in her eyes. "I've always felt a connection with you, Tom. From the moment we met. I love Jake, I do, but there's something about you that I can't ignore." I should have walked away right then and there. I should have told Jake what happened. But I didn't. Maybe it was the alcohol, maybe it was my own insecurities and desire to finally have something my brother didn't, but I kissed her back. One thing led to another, and we ended up having sex in a secluded part of the vineyard. It was passionate and intense, but as soon as it was over, the guilt hit me like a truck. Sarah started crying, saying she had made a huge mistake. I felt sick to my stomach. We agreed to never speak of it again. We rushed back to the reception separately, and I did my best to act normal for the rest of the night. Jake didn't suspect a thing, and Sarah played the role of the blushing bride perfectly. For the next few months, I avoided Jake and Sarah as much as possible. I made excuses not to attend family gatherings and ignored Jake's calls. I was racked with guilt, but I convinced myself that it was a one-time mistake and that telling Jake would only hurt him unnecessarily. Then, about 3 months after the wedding, I got a frantic call from Sarah. She was pregnant. My world came crashing down around me. She swore that it had to be mine because she and Jake had been using protection, but we hadn't that night at the wedding. I begged her to tell Jake that it was his, to never reveal our indiscretion. She agreed, saying she didn't want to ruin her marriage. Jake was overjoyed when they announced the pregnancy to the family. I felt like the worst person in the world. The next 6 months were torture. I watched as Jake doted on Sarah, talking excitedly about becoming a father. Our parents were thrilled about their first grandchild. And there I was, knowing that it was all based on a lie. Sarah gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. Jake named him Michael, after our grandfather. When I held Michael for the first time, I felt a connection I had never experienced before. This was my son, and I could never acknowledge him as such. As Michael grew, it became apparent that he looked more like me than Jake. He had my nose, my chin, my eyes. Jake joked about how strong our family genes must be, never suspecting the truth. The guilt was eating me alive. I couldn't sleep, I could barely eat. My work suffered, and I started drinking more heavily. Jake noticed the change in me and tried to reach out, but I pushed him away. How could I look my brother in the eye knowing what I had done? Sarah and I never spoke about that night again, but I could see the pain and guilt in her eyes whenever we were forced to be in the same room. She was a good mother to Michael, and she seemed to genuinely love Jake. I tried to convince myself that maybe it was better this way, that revealing the truth would only destroy multiple lives. But as Michael's first birthday approached, I couldn't take it anymore. The weight of the secret was crushing me. I decided I needed to know for sure, one way or the other. I managed to get a sample of Michael's hair and sent it off for a DNA test, along with my own sample. The results came back a week later. 99.9% match. Michael was definitely my son. I broke down when I saw the results. All the emotions I had been suppressing for the past year and a half came flooding out. I cried for hours, alternating between anger at myself, sorrow for the situation, and fear of what would happen next. I knew I had to tell Jake the truth. He deserved to know, no matter how much it would hurt him. I couldn't let him raise another man's child without his knowledge, especially when that man was his own brother. I asked Jake to meet me at a local park, away from Sarah and Michael. When he arrived, he could immediately tell something was wrong. "Tom, what's going on? You look like hell," he said, concern evident in his voice. I took a deep breath and started to speak, but the words caught in my throat. Jake put his hand on my shoulder. "Whatever it is, you can tell me. We're brothers, remember?" His kindness only made it harder. With tears in my eyes, I finally managed to say, "Jake, I've done something terrible. Something unforgivable." I told him everything. The encounter at the wedding, the months of guilt, the DNA test. Jake listened in stunned silence, his face a mix of shock, anger, and betrayal. When I finished, he stood up and walked a few steps away, his back to me. "Jake, I'm so sorry," I said, my voice breaking. "I know it doesn't change anything, but I never meant for this to happen. I've been living with this guilt for so long, and I..." He cut me off, turning to face me with fury in his eyes. "You're sorry? You slept with my wife on our wedding day, got her pregnant, and lied about it for almost 2 years, and you're sorry?" His voice was low and dangerous. I didn't know what to say. There were no words that could make this right. Jake stared at me for what felt like an eternity, his fists clenched at his sides. Then, without warning, he punched me square in the jaw. I fell to the ground, tasting blood in my mouth. I didn't fight back. I deserved it, and probably much worse. Jake stood over me, breathing heavily. "You're dead to me," he said, his voice cold. "Both of you. I never want to see you again." He walked away, leaving me on the ground. I watched him go, knowing that I had just lost my brother forever. The fallout was brutal. Jake filed for divorce immediately. Sarah tried to talk to him, to explain, but he wouldn't listen to her either. Our parents were devastated when they found out. Mom cried for days, and Dad couldn't even look at me. Jake moved out of their house and cut off all contact with Sarah and me. He even changed his phone number and blocked us on all social media. Sarah moved back in with her parents, taking Michael with her. I tried to step up and be there for Michael, but Sarah was hesitant. She blamed me for ruining her life, and part of me couldn't disagree. We're trying to work out a co-parenting arrangement, but it's complicated and painful. It's been 6 months since everything came out, and my life is unrecognizable. I lost my job due to poor performance, I barely speak to my parents, and most of our mutual friends have sided with Jake. I don't blame them. I'm in therapy now, trying to work through my guilt and figure out how to move forward. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I hope that someday, Jake might at least be willing to hear me out. I miss my brother more than I can express. As for Michael, he's the innocent one in all of this. I'm doing my best to be a good father to him, even though the circumstances are far from ideal. He's the one bright spot in this whole mess, and I'm determined to do right by him, even if I've failed everyone else. I know this story doesn't paint me in a good light, and it shouldn't. I made a series of terrible decisions that hurt the people I love most. If there's a lesson here, it's that one moment of weakness can have devastating consequences that ripple out far beyond yourself. To anyone reading this, learn from my mistakes. Be honest, be faithful, and if you do mess up, own up to it immediately. The truth always comes out eventually, and the longer you wait, the more damage it does. I don't know what the future holds for me, for Jake, for Sarah, or for Michael. All I can do now is try to be a better person and hope that someday, somehow, I can make amends for what I've done. Edit 1. Wow, this blew up overnight. I appreciate all the comments, even the ones calling me every name in the book. I deserve it. To answer some common questions. 1. Yes, I've tried to reach out to Jake multiple times. He's made it clear through our parents that he wants nothing to do with me. I'm respecting his wishes for now, but I hope one day he'll be willing to talk. 2. Sarah and I are not together and never will be. What happened was a mistake, and we both regret it deeply. We're trying to co-parent Michael as best we can, but there's no romantic relationship between us. 3. To those asking why I didn't come clean sooner, I was a coward, plain and simple. I convinced myself that keeping quiet was better for everyone, but I was really just afraid of facing the consequences of my actions. It was selfish and wrong. 4. Some have asked about legal implications. Jake is still listed as Michael's father on the birth certificate. We're working with lawyers to figure out the best way forward in terms of custody and support. It's complicated and messy. 5. To those saying I should have kept my mouth shut and taken the secret to my grave, I considered it. But I couldn't live with the guilt, and I couldn't bear the thought of Jake never knowing the truth about his son. He deserved to know, no matter how painful. 6. Yes, I'm in therapy. It's helping, but I have a long way to go. I'm also attending support groups for people dealing with family estrangement. It's a difficult journey, but I'm committed to becoming a better person. 7. To those asking about Michael, he's doing okay, all things considered. He's too young to understand what's happening, but we're working with a child psychologist to ensure we handle things in the best way possible as he grows up. Thank you to those offering support and advice. And to those sharing similar stories, I'm sorry you've been through this pain. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. I'll update if there are any significant developments, but for now, I'm focusing on being the best father I can be to Michael and working on myself. If nothing else, I hope my story serves as a cautionary tale. Edit 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and there have been some developments. I'll try to address them point by point. 1. Jake reached out. It wasn't directly to me, but through our parents. He's requested a meeting with all of us, me, Sarah, our parents, and himself. I'm nervous but hopeful. It's scheduled for next week. 2. Sarah and I have been working with a mediator to establish a formal co-parenting plan. It's been difficult, but we're making progress. We're both committed to putting Michael's needs first. 3. I've started volunteering at a local community center, working with at-risk youth. It's been incredibly humbling and rewarding. I'm hoping to make some positive impact, even if it's small. 4. My parents and I have been slowly rebuilding our relationship. It's not the same as before, and it may never be, but we're talking more. They've even started spending time with Michael. 5. I've been sober for 2 months now. The therapy and support groups have been crucial in helping me face my issues without turning to alcohol. 6. To those who've asked, no, I'm not dating and don't plan to for a long time. I need to focus on being a good father and working on myself. 7. Some people have suggested writing a letter to Jake, explaining everything in detail. I've done this, but I haven't sent it yet. I'm waiting to see how our meeting goes. 8. Michael is doing well. He's starting to talk more, and his personality is really shining through. It's bittersweet watching him grow, knowing the complicated situation he's been born into. 9. I've started looking for a new job. It's been tough with everything on my record, but I'm not giving up. I need to provide for Michael and get my life back on track. 10. To those who've reached out privately sharing similar stories, thank you. It helps to know I'm not alone, even though I wish none of us had to go through this. I'm still taking it one day at a time. There's a long road ahead, but I'm committed to making things right as much as I can. Thank you all for your continued support, advice, and yes, even the harsh criticism. It all helps in its own way. I'll update again after the meeting with Jake, if he's okay with me sharing. Wish me luck. Edit 3. The meeting with Jake happened. It didn't go as I'd hoped, but it wasn't a complete disaster either. Here's what went down. We met at our parents' house. The tension was palpable from the moment Jake walked in. He looked tired and angry, but he was there, which was more than I'd dared to hope for in recent months. Our parents tried to mediate, but Jake made it clear he was only there to say his piece. He started by telling us how much pain we'd caused him, how we'd destroyed his trust not just in us, but in relationships in general. It was hard to hear, but we listened. When it was my turn to speak, I apologized again. I told him about the therapy, the volunteering, my sobriety. I explained that I knew nothing I could do would ever make up for what I'd done, but that I was committed to being a better person, a better brother, and a good father to Michael. Jake listened, but I could see the hurt and anger in his eyes. When I finished, he said something I'll never forget: I don't forgive you. I don't know if I ever will. But Michael deserves to know his family, all of it. So I'm willing to try. He laid out some ground rules. 1. He doesn't want to see Sarah or me unless it's absolutely necessary, like at family events we can't avoid. 2. He's willing to have a relationship with Michael, but it will be on his terms. He made it clear he doesn't see himself as Michael's father, but as an uncle. 3. He wants full transparency from now on. No more secrets, no more lies. 4. He's not ready to call me his brother again, but he's willing to work towards some kind of relationship for Michael's sake. It's not ideal, but it's more than I had any right to expect. We all agreed to his terms. After the meeting, Jake pulled me aside. He told me that while he's still angry and hurt, he doesn't hate me. He said he needs time and space to heal, and that he hopes one day we can rebuild some kind of relationship. It was a small glimmer of hope in what has been a very dark time. As for Sarah, she and Jake barely spoke during the meeting. It's clear that bridge is well and truly burned. She's focusing on Michael and has started seeing a therapist of her own. Michael wasn't at the meeting, but Jake has agreed to see him next month. We're working with the child psychologist to figure out the best way to introduce Jake into Michael's life. To those asking about legal matters, we're still working through it. Jake has agreed not to contest paternity, which simplifies things somewhat. We're in the process of updating Michael's birth certificate. I know we have a long road ahead. Trust has been shattered, relationships destroyed. For the first time in a long time, I feel a small glimmer of hope. It's not much, but it's something to hold on to.